Hello, everyone. I'm glad you're here. Please like and subscribe so I can tell more interesting stories. Now let's get started. The sun was still lazy in the sky when I parked my beat-up truck at the Horseshoe Canyon trailhead. April in Utah meant cool mornings and harsh afternoons. Perfect weather for a solo hike. I wasn't worried. I had done this 100 times, just me, the rocks, the wind, and the satisfying crunch of boots against red dust. There was no reception, but I didn't care. I left a note on my windshield about where I was going. Well, sort of. I just scribbled Bluejohn on the map and hoped that counted. Not my best survival move, I'll admit. The canyon greeted me like an old friend, tight sandstone corridors, winding narrows and shadows that moved like smoke. There's something ancient about these walls, like they've been watching everything since dinosaurs roamed here, which according to some paleontologists isn't far from the truth. Tracks of ancient creatures are still visible in some parts of Utah. Makes you feel tiny. And not in a cute way. I scrambled down into the slot canyon, lowering myself carefully between rock ledges. Bluejohn is not for the faint of heart. Tight squeezes, vertical drops, sheer walls. But that's the appeal, isn't it? You versus the world. I felt like Indiana Jones without the whip. Or the funding. By noon, I was deep inside a narrow passage no wider than a coat closet. That's when I saw it, a drop about 10 feet below, with a large boulder lodged above. I tested it. It seemed solid. Keyword seemed. I started climbing down. My hands gripped the wall feet, searching for a foothold. Then, with one wrong step, and the sound I'll never forget, thud, the boulder shifted. It didn't fall like a movie prop. It lunged, fast, heavy, and angry. My right hand was between the canyon wall and the boulder before I even knew it. And just like that, I was stuck, like a fly in amber. At first, I didn't panic. I mean, how bad could it be? I'd get out somehow. I pulled, I twisted, I yelled. I even tried laughing it off, muttering, "Okay, rock joke's over." But the rock didn't laugh back. That boulder, about 800 pounds of solid, unfeeling sandstone, had wedged itself perfectly into the slot, trapping my arm like it was born to do just that. Later experts would call it a chockstone. I had another name for it, but I'll keep that PG. My fingers began to go numb. Not from the pressure, just from the sheer absurdity of the situation. You ever get so shocked, your brain just goes quiet? That happened. The kind of silence that wraps around your thoughts like a wet blanket. I looked up. Blue sky. Still blue. Still far away. No one above. No one below. No one at all. Here's a fun historical fact to lighten the mood. In 1274, Genghis Khan's grandson attempted to invade Japan, but a typhoon destroyed his fleet. The Japanese called it kamikaze, or divine wind. I could have used one of those about now. A divine wind to just blow this rock off my hand and maybe gift me a sandwich. I took inventory. 1/2 liter of water. 2 burritos. A cheap multi-tool with a dull knife. 1 camcorder. No cell service. And a lot of time. Still, I wasn't scared. Not yet. I figured someone would come by eventually. Hikers pass through here, right? Well, not really. Turns out Bluejohn Canyon is one of the most isolated pockets in the Utah desert. Historians still debate whether it was named after a 19th century outlaw or just a guy with mismatched eyes, one blue, one brown. Either way, nobody lived there. Nobody visited often. I had picked one of the loneliest canyons in America to play cowboy. Hours passed. Shadows shifted. The sun leaned west. I was sweating both from heat and that creeping whisper in my gut. The one that said, "This is bad, really bad." And then the first night came. Canyon nights are cold. Not brisk, not chilly, bone-snapping. The rock stayed cold too, like it was laughing at me in its ancient frozen language. I wrapped myself in what little I had. I barely slept. Between the cold, the pain, and the unnerving silence, I lay there blinking into the dark, like a man suspended between two lives, before and after the rock. Somewhere around midnight, I thought about the stupidest things, like the fact that sloths can hold their breath longer than dolphins. You read that right. Sloths. My brain was pulling random trivia like it was trying to entertain itself in a locked room. In the early morning light, I heard wind. No footsteps, no help. Just the indifferent desert, sighing past the slot canyon walls. I began to understand the seriousness of it all. This wasn't a joke. This wasn't a test. This was it. I was stuck alone, and the rock wasn't going anywhere. And neither was I. By the second morning, the numbness in my fingers wasn't just physical. It had sunk into my soul. I wasn't just stuck. I was held, like a fossil, pressed into the earth, by a planet that didn't care whether I breathed or not. I tried again, with every ounce of stubborn optimism I had left. I pulled, I pushed. I braced my legs against the walls, twisted my torso, used the dull blade of the multi-tool to chip away at the rock. Nothing. My arm wasn't just trapped. It was part of the canyon now. At one point, I laughed dry and weird like a cough, from someone who forgot how jokes work. "Congratulations," I muttered aloud. "You've become one with Utah." My thirst wasn't too bad yet. I took tiny sips from the water bottle, pacing myself like a paranoid squirrel. I had maybe 300 milliliters left. That's about as much as a soda can after your friend takes 2 big gulps. I had to make it stretch. To distract myself, I set up the camcorder. If I was going to die out here, I figured I'd leave something behind. Some record. Some hey, here's what happened to the guy who thought solo hiking was a cool personality trait. The red record light blinked on, and I looked into the lens. My voice cracked as I tried to sound casual. "Hey Mom, Dad, I'm in a bit of a situation." Bit of a situation. Classic understatement. The British would have been proud. I filmed short messages to friends, family, even a few exes. Not gonna lie, I tossed in 1 or 2 apologies. You know the kind you think about at 3 a.m. when your brain does its annual cringe reel. Turns out, mortality makes you sentimental. But mostly, I just stared at the rock. Talked to it, like it was a roommate. An incredibly rude, silent, immovable roommate. I named it Benny. Don't ask why. It just felt right. Benny the boulder. And let me tell you, Benny didn't budge. By midday, the canyon turned into an oven. Heat bounced off the walls like a convection roast. My skin cracked. My lips felt like dried out leaves. I tried peeing into an empty bottle thinking maybe I'd need it later. Survival instincts are weird like that. Your brain becomes half scientist, half desperate raccoon. And while we're on the subject of weird facts, did you know vending machines kill more people annually than sharks? Yep, that's true. They fall on people. Honestly, I'd take a vending machine right now if it meant snacks or help. As I sat there sweating through another hour of useless thoughts, I saw a raven fly overhead. It cawed once and vanished. Funny thing about ravens' Native American folklore often calls them tricksters, messengers between life and death. I stared at the spot it disappeared and muttered, "You better not be here for me, buddy." And still no footsteps, no voices, just the rock and me slowly baking. Night 2 was worse. The cold stung deeper. Pain moved from a dull hum to a sharp scream that radiated up my shoulder and into my back. I tried to meditate. Didn't work. I tried to sleep. Nope. My dreams, when they came, were kaleidoscopic water fountains, dripping pipes, people offering me lemonade and yanking it away at the last second. I woke up gasping, mouth dry, like old parchment. The water bottle now held maybe 2 sips. 2. I eyed it like it was the Holy Grail, held it in both hands like it might vanish if I blinked too long. The next day blurred. I don't know if it was Tuesday or Thursday. I just know that I started thinking differently. Less planning, more reflecting. I thought about my sister, about that stupid fight we had over Christmas, something about politics. I thought about my old dog Max, who used to bark at thunderstorms and then hide under the table like a cowardly war hero. I thought about how I had once told someone, I'd rather die doing something amazing than live doing something boring. Yeah, that quote, it aged terribly. Historians still debate whether humans evolved their complex emotional spectrum from early tribal communication or from living in deeply interdependent social groups. Either way, being alone in that canyon, really alone, made me realize we aren't built for this kind of silence. We're social creatures. Even introverts need somebody. I didn't cry yet, not then, but I felt it coming. You know that itchy sensation behind your eyes where your face feels tight and your chest gets hot? Yeah, that. I stared at my trapped hand, swollen and purple and oddly alien. It was already losing its shape. A ghost of a hand. It didn't feel like part of me anymore, and for the first time I whispered the words, I might die here. They hung in the air, like smoke, heavy and strange. But then somewhere between fear and fading hope, something shifted. Not the rock. Me. I started to imagine what it would actually take to survive. Not wait. Not wish. Act. My throat burned like I'd swallowed sandpaper. I could feel every breath dragging over cracked lips and a tongue that felt like beef jerky left out in the sun. I held the last inch of water like it was a lottery ticket. 1 sip, maybe 2 if I lied to myself. I stared at it so long I started having this weird daydream where it turned into a Coke commercial. You know, the one slow-motion bottle, ice cubes clinking, someone whispering "ah" in the background. Torture. Pure torture. I finally drank it. Just enough to wet my tongue. It felt like kissing a cloud. And then, nothing. No more water. I was officially on desert time. Each hour dragged like it was being pulled by an old mule with a limp. Time got real strange. I kept seeing things that weren't there. People walking by, helicopters overhead, even a deli sandwich once. I laughed at that one. "You're not real," I said to a floating pastrami on rye. Then I cried. Not for the sandwich. For everything. Somewhere, on that 3rd or 4th day, I stopped counting. I filmed another video. My voice was slower, raspier, like I had swallowed gravel. I told my parents I loved them. Told my friends I was sorry for every dumb thing I'd ever said. Told my future nieces and nephews to be brave, curious, and never go hiking without leaving a real note. But in between all that, I waited. My body wanted to sleep all the time, but I knew that was dangerous. I forced myself to stay awake, to talk, to hum, to sing. I even belted out a horrible rendition of "Ain't No Mountain High Enough." I think the canyon winced. Here's something odd. I remembered this random fact that honey never spoils. Like archaeologists found 3,000-year-old honey in Egyptian tombs, and it was still edible. Meanwhile, I was rotting after 4 days. Go figure. I kept trying to chip away at the rock with my multi-tool, but it was like trying to sculpt granite with a butter knife. I nicked the sandstone, scraped my fingers raw, but Benny the boulder stayed put. My arm had started to smell. I didn't want to say it aloud, but I knew what it meant. It was dying. The skin looked gray. The fingers were ballooned. Infection was a whisper in my ear. Soon, it said. Soon you'll have to decide. One afternoon, I started talking to an imaginary news crew. I looked into the camcorder like it was a studio camera and went, "Welcome back. to Canyon Channel 5. In today's headlines, Aron Ralston still hasn't learned his lesson about solo hiking. I imagined the anchor being a chipmunk wearing glasses. Losing your mind is funny until it's not. That evening, I tried something new. I rigged a harness with my climbing rope and attempted to lift the boulder using a pulley system. It moved about an inch, then laughed at me and fell back into place, like it was flipping me off. My arm crushed, and now more decoration than limb didn't even flinch. I whispered, "Okay, you win." But that wasn't the end. That night, I had a vivid hallucination. I was at a family dinner. Everyone was there. My mom passed the peas. My dad poured wine. And then this little boy appeared beside me. He looked like me. He reached out for my hand, and I woke up crying because that boy, he felt like my son, a child I hadn't even met yet, a life I hadn't lived, and that image did something to me. It shook loose the dust on my soul. I wasn't just trying to escape death anymore. I was trying to meet my future. I was fighting for the possibility of that boy being real someday. Historians still debate whether hallucinations in extreme conditions are a product of neurological damage or the brain's last-ditch effort at spiritual survival. I say it doesn't matter. What I saw felt real, and it changed everything. The next morning, I stared at my arm for a long time. I poked it with the blade. No feeling, just dead. I knew what I had to do. Not in theory, not in some action hero way. I knew. It wasn't a choice anymore. It was a sentence. It was the only way out. But that night, I didn't act yet. I just talked to Benny, my new old enemy. Tomorrow, I told him. Tomorrow, it's you or me. I smiled. Actually, smiled. Bet on me, you fat slab. I woke up at dawn, and for once, I didn't check. The sky didn't reach for my empty bottle, didn't even try to wiggle my arm. I just stared at Benny. Benny the boulder, my prison guard, my captor, my quiet companion. And I said, time's up. There's something beautifully twisted about reaching the point where you're no longer afraid of pain. It's not bravery, not really. It's just math. Stay and die slow. Act and maybe live, or maybe just die faster. Either way, the equation finally made sense. I looked down at my arm. The skin had turned a sickly gray blue. It smelled like old meat left in a locked car in July. My fingers were bloated. I tapped them with the blade of the multi-tool and felt nothing. Absolutely nothing. It was no longer part of me. It was already gone. So I gave it a funeral. I whispered, "Thanks for all the high fives." Then I got to work. I didn't start with the knife. No, I'm not that crazy. First, I had to break the arm. Because believe it or not, slicing through bone with a dull multi-tool isn't in my particular skill set, or anyone's. I braced my left hand against the canyon wall and torqued my body sideways using the trapped arm as a lever. There was a loud snap, then another, like celery breaking underfoot in a forest. First the radius, then the ulna. You don't forget those sounds. They echo inside you. I screamed. Not from pain, honestly. I barely felt anything, but from shock. From pure raw horror that this was my arm, my body, and I had just broken it on purpose. Then came the blade. Let me tell you, cutting through your own flesh is not poetic. It's slow. It's clumsy. It's the kind of thing your brain tries to protect you from by blacking out. But I didn't black out. I narrated it, out loud, like I was hosting a cooking show nobody ever asked for. Okay, I said, let's get under the skin now. I sliced through muscle, tendons, veins. I had to stop several times because the blade was so dull, it bent. Bent. Not ideal for amateur surgery. Here's a historical curveball for you. In the 16th century battlefield, surgeons would use boiling oil to cauterize wounds. No anesthesia, just oil. I thought about that while I carved into my arm. Thought about how lucky I was to have anything, even a crappy multi-tool. At one point, I hit a nerve. I don't recommend that. The nerve sparked like lightning across my entire body. Pain, so pure, it felt fake, like being electrocuted with emotion. I screamed, cursed, bit down on my tongue until I tasted blood. But I kept going. Eventually, after what felt like hours though, it was maybe 40 minutes, my arm came free. I stumbled backward, landing hard on the canyon floor, clutching the stub of my right arm, which was now spraying blood like a horror movie squib. I had a camelback hose in my bag. I yanked it out, looped it around the stump, and twisted until the bleeding slowed. It wasn't elegant, but it worked. Sort of. Then I just sat there, laughing. Not because it was funny, because it was over. Because I had done the thing that no one thinks they'll ever have to do. I had made the deal. Traded a piece of my body for the chance at more life. That kind of bargain doesn't come with receipts. I looked down at the severed arm, still stuck under Benny. It looked peaceful. Like it was sleeping. Like it didn't just ruin my week. And in that moment, I said something I never expected. Thank you. Because without Benny, without that rock, I never would have met the part of me that chooses life. The feral, stubborn, wild part of me that refuses to surrender. That part had been hiding under the sarcasm and hiking gear all along. Here's a weird fact, for the road starfish can regrow their arms. I'm not saying I'm a starfish, but let's just say I felt a little kinship in that moment. The pain was catching up now. My vision swam. The adrenaline was crashing. I needed to move, fast. I packed what I could with one hand, left the camcorder behind. It was too heavy, too awkward. And honestly, I figured if I didn't make it, someone would find it eventually, like a time capsule of sheer madness. I looked back one last time. The canyon was quiet. Benny sat still as always. Stay here, I said and smiled. Then I turned and started climbing, one-armed. Climbing out of the canyon with one hand and a homemade tourniquet was not part of the original hiking plan, in case that's not obvious. Every move had to be calculated. Every foothold mattered. My blood was still leaking. The world tilted at strange angles, and I kept hearing a low hum in my ears, like a distant engine that never got closer. I pulled myself up, using my knees, my feet, my forehead, whatever worked. The sandstone scraped the skin off my shins. My left shoulder screamed in protest, but I kept going, because the canyon wasn't going to help. It was done with me. Once I reached the top of the slot, I didn't cry. I didn't cheer. I just sat there for a minute and whispered, "Okay, now what?" The desert stretched ahead like a sunburned sea. I had about 7 miles to hike to, where I thought people might be. That's not bad on a normal day, but I just self-amputated my arm. I was barely standing, and the sun was back full blast. I wrapped the stump tighter and started walking. Left, right, drag, repeat. I had about 10 ounces of blood left in my body, exaggerating, but not by much, and every drop felt like it was trying to escape through the ragged end of my arm. I stumbled a lot, fell a few times. One cactus, and I had a very intimate encounter. We're not on speaking terms anymore. You want your odd fact of the day: goats have rectangular pupils. I thought about that for 20 minutes while I was limping across the slick rock. Don't ask why. The brain does what it has to do to not collapse. At one point, I found a puddle of water. Real water. Probably runoff or animal dug, but I didn't care. I dropped to my knees and slurped it like a desperate raccoon. No filter, no dignity, just need. I followed the sun west, hoping I wasn't getting turned around. I tried shouting a few times, but it sounded like someone else's voice. Thin, hollow, almost embarrassed. And then I saw them. 3 hikers. From far away, they looked like gods. Bright shirts, tall shadows walking upright, like they had no idea the earth was trying to kill someone a few hundred feet away. I raised my arm, the one I had left, and waved it frantically. They looked. They paused. One of them pointed. Then they ran toward me. I collapsed before they reached me, whispering help like it was a prayer. They gave me water. Bandaged my stump better than I had. One of them even shared a granola bar. I chewed it like it was the finest steak dinner of my life. They activated their GPS beacon, and I just laid back in the sand, letting the desert sky swirl above me. Blue, endless, forgiving. They didn't ask a lot of questions, probably too scared to. I didn't explain much. Got trapped. Cut my arm. Need help. That was the gist. About an hour later, I heard the distant chop, chop, chop of salvation. The helicopter. You ever see a helicopter rising over a ridge when you've accepted death? It looks like an angel with rotors, I cried. I'll admit it. Just a few tears. Quiet ones. No sobbing. I had no energy for sobbing. The paramedics dropped down, strapped me in, gave me an IV, and airlifted me out of there. As I rose above the desert, I looked down at the place that had tried to end me. Bluejohn Canyon. Beautiful, brutal, indifferent. Historians still debate whether early Native American tribes avoided certain canyons because they believed spirits lived there, or because they simply knew danger when they saw it. Either way, I now understood the reverence. That place isn't just rock and sand. It's a test, a gatekeeper. And I barely made it out. The helicopter took me to a hospital in Moab. From there, they stabilized me, cleaned what was left of my right arm, and started the long, boring process of not dying. I don't remember much about that first night in the hospital. Just that everything was white, and soft, and clean. No sand, no blood, no Benny. And that's when it hit me. I was free. I had survived. But survival has a price. The hospital smelled like plastic and lemon-scented bleach. Clean, sterile, and natural. After 6 days of sandstone sweat and blood, even air conditioning felt like a sci-fi miracle. I lay in the bed staring at the ceiling tiles like they were stars, counting each one as if they were proof I wasn't dreaming. A nurse asked me my name. I answered, but it sounded weird coming out of my mouth, like it belonged to someone else. Someone with 2 arms. The doctors poked and prodded, took blood, started IVs. I heard the word dehydration about 12 times. Infection came next. Shock was another favorite. Eventually, they gave me morphine. Sweet, merciful morphine. For the first time in nearly a week, my body relaxed. But my brain, it was doing cartwheels. Every time I closed my eyes, I was back in the canyon, trapped, screaming, trying to saw through my own arm with a glorified spoon. They told me I slept for 20 hours straight. When I woke up, my mom was there. I hadn't seen her in months. Her eyes looked older, tired. But when she touched my forehead and whispered, "You're safe now," I broke. I didn't mean to cry. I wasn't trying to be dramatic. But it's like my body remembered that crying was allowed again. She held my face like she used to when I was 6 and had the flu. And I whispered, "I didn't think I'd ever see you again." Later that day, they brought me what was left of my gear. My shoes were worn through. My backpack was stained with blood, and the camcorder still intact. I didn't watch the footage, not yet, but just holding it reminded me I had planned to die, had spoken to people I loved like it was the end, and now I was back, alive. Well, mostly. Here's something weird. After traumatic amputations, some people experience phantom limb syndrome. Basically, your brain thinks the missing part is still there. Itches you can't scratch. Fingers that feel curled when they're gone. I had it bad. My right hand was always clenched in a fist, except it wasn't there. Sometimes I swore I could feel wind passing through the fingers that didn't exist. They gave me a stress ball for my left hand. I squeezed it constantly, maybe hoping the pressure would make the ghost hand relax. It didn't. People kept asking me what it felt like cutting off my own arm. What was I supposed to say? Fun? Exhilarating? 5 stars on Yelp. No. It was terrifying. Raw. Necessary. I did it because I had to. Not because I'm brave. Not because I'm special. Just because I wasn't ready to die. That's it. That's the whole story. Except, that's not the whole story. Survival messes with your head. You think it ends when you're rescued. But it doesn't. It follows you home. Lives in your shoes. Sleeps under your bed. I couldn't go outside for weeks. Every gust of wind sounded like a helicopter. Every closed door reminded me of the slot canyon. Even now, I dream about the rock. Sometimes it's chasing me. Sometimes it's whispering things I can't hear. Sometimes it just sits there silent and smug. Historians still debate whether early humans survived extreme trauma better because of community bonding or individual resilience. Personally, I think it's both. I survived because I had people waiting for me, and because I refused to let that canyon become my grave. Odd fact of the day, the world's oldest known prosthetic is a wooden toe found on an Egyptian mummy dated around 950 BC. It even had leather straps for comfort. Pretty stylish for something that predates sliced bread. I didn't have a wooden hand. I got a high-tech prosthetic. Sleek, carbon fiber, futuristic. But it didn't feel like mine. I named it Lefty because humor is how I process trauma. And irony is my love language. One afternoon, my buddy from Colorado visited. He brought burritos. We sat on the couch, eating quietly until he finally said, "So, do you hate rocks now?" I looked at him and smiled. Nah, just the heavy ones. A year later, I returned to Bluejohn Canyon. People thought I was crazy. Why go back? They asked. Isn't that traumatic? Well, yeah, of course it was. But there's something weirdly human about needing to look your demons in the eye. Even if they weigh 800 pounds and have no eyes. I stood at the rim of the canyon and stared down at the place where I left a piece of myself. Literally. Somewhere beneath those sun-baked layers of rock and dust, part of my arm still rested. And strangely, I didn't feel fear. I felt gratitude and something close to peace. Closure, maybe. I didn't climb back in. I didn't need to. I just sat there listening to the wind echo down the stone corridors. It sounded different now. Not angry, not mocking. Just quiet. They say when you survive something life-shattering, your brain rewires itself. That's not just poetic. It's neurological. Trauma changes your default settings. You feel too much, or nothing. You become hyper-aware, or deeply numb. I was all of that, sometimes in the same hour. Back home, I became that guy. The one who cut off his own arm. Interview requests, TV specials, people asking me to hold up my prosthetic for selfies like I was a living meme. Smile. Aron. Pretend the canyon didn't try to eat you. Don't get me wrong. I appreciated the love, the kindness, the admiration. But sometimes it felt like everyone was celebrating the wrong part. They loved the act, the cutting, the shock of it all. But to me, the real story wasn't about what I lost. It was about what I chose. I chose to live. That's not drama. That's not cinema. That's a decision. A quiet, internal, very messy decision. And I think that's something we all do in different ways. We choose to keep going, to show up, to heal. Sometimes with prosthetics, sometimes with therapy, sometimes with really dark humor and a therapy dog named Waffles. Okay, I don't actually have a therapy dog, but if I did, his name would be Waffles. I hike differently now. I still go solo, sometimes. Yeah, I know, roll your eyes. But I leave notes. Real ones. I carry better gear. I check in. I bring satellite messengers. And every time I squeeze through a tight crevice, I pause. Not in fear, in respect. You learn things as silence that you can't learn in noise. You meet parts of yourself you didn't know were there. Some are ugly. Some are brave. Some are really into vending machine facts. And some, they're just waiting for the chance to prove they're stronger than the story you've been living. The phantom pain never really goes away. I still wake up some nights and try to scratch my right hand. It's like my body can't accept it's gone. Like it's holding space for something I sacrificed. And maybe that's okay. Because I didn't just lose a limb in that canyon. I lost fear. I lost the belief that I was fragile. And I gained something harder to describe. Call it resilience. Call it grit. Call it whatever you want. But me, I just call it survival. And so that's my story. Not just of pain, not just of loss, but of choice. Of what it means to look death in the face and still say, not today. I don't tell this to shock anyone. I don't tell it to seem brave or dramatic. I tell it because maybe somewhere in your life there's a canyon too. Maybe it's not made of stone. Maybe it's a breakup, a diagnosis, a secret you've never said out loud. Maybe you're already there, wedged between something you love and something that's crushing you. But listen closely. You're not stuck. You're deciding. And maybe, just maybe, that decision is the beginning of everything new. The silence that tried to swallow me didn't win. The boulder didn't win. Pain didn't win. What won was that tiny part of me, half-starved, half-broken, that still believed in the next step, the next breath, the next laugh. I carry that with me every day, in the way I live, in the way I laugh, in the way I shake hands well-hand and tell people they're stronger than they know. Survival isn't about walking out of the canyon unscathed. It's about crawling out with your soul intact. So, wherever you are right now, whether you're soaring or sinking, just remember, you don't need to be perfect. You just need to choose. Even if it hurts, especially if it hurts. Because sometimes that pain, that's the beginning of your freedom.